The letter specifically mentioned Amara and Nneka. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. The uncles became restless. The aunties started whispering nervously because nobody knew what Pa Edwin had written. And deep down, many of them were afraid. Night came slowly. Rainwater dripped from rooftops while mourners gathered inside the large hall for the final family meeting. Candles flickered near Pa Edwin's portrait. The air smelled of perfume, wet soil, and tension. Then the oldest elder in the family stood up holding an envelope. Silence filled the room. Even children stopped moving. The elder adjusted his glasses. Then he began reading. To my family, if you are hearing this letter, then I am gone. People bowed their heads quietly. Before I leave this earth, I must speak the truth I kept inside for many years. The room became still. What this family did to Chidinma and her daughters after my nephew died was evil. A shockwave moved through the hall. Nobody expected such direct words. The elder continued reading. I watched widows and children suffer while family members fought over land and property. I watched greed destroy love. Several relatives lowered their eyes. Those girls were mocked, rejected, and abandoned by the same people who now celebrate success around them. The silence became painful. Nobody could even look at Amara and Nneka. Yet despite everything, those girls survived with dignity.
Amara stared at the floor quietly. Nneka folded her arms tightly. Some of you called them proud, but pride was not their problem. Pain was. One auntie suddenly began crying softly. The letter continued. I write this because I know many of you only respect wealth. Now that the girls have succeeded, you will suddenly remember their family. But where was this family when they were hungry? The room felt smaller, heavier, more uncomfortable. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The land that belonged to their father was stolen from them. Therefore, before my death, I legally transferred my remaining properties and farmland to Amara and Nneka. The entire hall exploded. Gasps, shouting, whispers. One uncle immediately stood up. Impossible! Another yelled, that old man was manipulated. But the elder raised his hand. There are signed legal documents. Everything was finalized before his death. Panic spread across several faces because Pa Edwin owned enormous land across the village, land many relatives secretly hoped to inherit. And now, everything belonged to the sisters. The same sisters they once humiliated. One uncle turned toward Amara angrily. So this was your plan? The room froze. Amara slowly stood up, calm, controlled, but her eyes carried years of buried pain. Our plan? Her voice was soft, dangerously soft. When our father died, did we plan to sleep hungry? Nobody answered. When our mother begged for help and you mocked her, was that our plan too? Silence. When you threw us out of our own home, was that our plan? Several people looked away. We were children. That sentence hit harder than shouting, because suddenly everyone remembered. Not successful women, children. 2 frightened girls abandoned by their own family. Nneka finally spoke too. Do you know what it feels like watching your mother cry every night because relatives treated her like death? An auntie covered her face. Do you know what it feels like being hungry while your cousins laugh at you? Nobody spoke. The sisters weren't shouting. That made it worse. The quiet truth crushed the room more than anger ever could. Then Nneka said something nobody expected. We didn't come here for revenge. People looked up slowly. If we wanted revenge, we would have returned years ago. Amara nodded. We came because Pa Edwin was the only elder who treated us like human beings. Tears filled the old elder's eyes. Then Amara reached into her bag and placed a thick file on the table. And since today seems to be a day for truth, the room became tense again. The uncles exchanged nervous glances. Amara opened the file. Inside were property records, bank papers, legal documents. The land stolen from our father years ago. We legally bought most of it back over the last 3 years. The room went silent again. One uncle nearly lost balance. What? Nneka continued calmly. Many of you sold those lands cheaply during financial problems. You didn't even realize who was buying them through agents. Several relatives stared in horror. The sisters already owned huge portions of the family land. Quietly, secretly, not through violence, through patience, through success, through intelligence. The same girls once called useless. A heavy silence covered the hall. Nobody knew what to say anymore. The power had completely shifted. Then something unexpected happened. Their mother slowly stood up. Old now. Gentle. Quiet. For years she avoided family gatherings. But tonight she looked stronger than anyone in the room. She faced the relatives calmly. I prayed for years that God would fight for my daughters. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Today, I have seen my answer. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Because shame had finally entered the room. Real shame. Not the kind people pretend. The heavy kind that forces people to face themselves. Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky. Inside, generations of bitterness sat quietly between family members. Then one of the aunties suddenly knelt down, crying. Forgive us. The room froze again. Nobody expected that. Soon another auntie started crying too. Then even one of the older uncles lowered his head. Not everybody apologized. Some still looked angry. Some still looked jealous. But something had
undeniably broken that night. The illusion, the pride, the belief that the sisters would never rise. The belief that the sisters would never rise. For years, the family treated them like failures. Now, everyone sat watching the same girls command respect without raising their voices. Eventually, the meeting ended quietly. People walked outside slowly beneath the rain. Nobody gossiped loudly anymore. Nobody mocked the sisters. Instead, villagers whispered different things now. Life changes fast. Never mock struggling people. God really fought for those girls. Late that night, after most guests had gone, Amara and Nneka stood alone beneath the old mango tree. The same tree where they once cried as children. Rainwater dripped softly from the branches. For a long moment, neither sister spoke. Then Nneka laughed quietly. Not happy laughter, the exhausted kind. Can you believe we survived all this? Amara looked toward the dark family house. Sometimes I still feel like that 16-year-old girl. Nneka nodded slowly. Me too. Silence again. Then Amara spoke softly. Do you hate them? Nneka thought for a while. I used to. Another pause. But carrying hate for years is heavy. The rain became lighter. What they did shaped us, but I don't want it to define us forever. Amara smiled faintly. That was the strange thing about pain. Sometimes it destroys people. Sometimes it builds them. The sisters could have become bitter, cruel, vindictive. Instead, they became powerful and somehow softer. The next morning, before leaving the village, the sisters made one final decision. They announced plans to rebuild the abandoned primary school near the community. They would also create scholarships for widows' children. The same kinds of children they once were. The announcement shocked everybody again. After all the family had done, the sisters still chose to help the community? One journalist covering the funeral later asked Amara why. Her answer spread across social media for weeks. She said, pain can turn you into the very thing that hurt you. We refused to let that happen. And just like that, the two sisters, once hated by their family, became the women the entire village would never forget. Not because of their wealth, but because they returned to the place that broke them and still chose dignity over revenge. The funeral truly changed everything. Not only for the sisters, but for everyone who finally realized that today's rejected child may become tomorrow's greatest blessing. And sometimes, the people a family throws away are the very people destined to restore its honor.